Good afternoon and welcome to Chutzpah, Skills for the Future, presented by the Israel Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines and the Embassy of Israel, Manila. Please welcome your moderator, ICCP Vice President of External Affairs and Public Relations, Mr. David Elephant.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Chutzpah, Skills for the Future. My name is David Elephant, and I will be the event moderator. Before I continue, I'd like to let you know we are live on the ICCP Facebook page. Please like and share. I would also like to invite all of you to follow us on Instagram at israelchamber.ph, Twitter at israelchamberph, and on LinkedIn. Before we begin, allow me to thank the Embassy of Israel, Manila, for making this event possible. I would like to acknowledge our valued sponsors for today's event, our Platinum members, Ethiopian Airlines and Xleak Events, our Gold members, Dianon Business Consultancy, Duzit Tani Manila, Star K Kosher, and Watermatic Philippines. Thank you for your support. Let's start the program with a few words from His Excellency Ambassador Ilan Flus.
Hi, good afternoon, David, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here today with you. Israel is, I've been here to the Philippines almost 4 weeks. Which is great. And we believe here at the embassy that one of the opportunities and important sectors that can connect Israel and the Philippines is the area of innovation and technologies. Israel is known as a startup nation, startup country, more than 6,000 startups in the Israeli scenery, and we're looking more to the future in many different areas. Despite the pandemic, the COVID-19, actually, maybe because of the pandemic, we even saw more enthusiasm and more energy in this sector in trying to find solutions for the complicated reality which we're all doing today, and all kind of online grocery and shopping and mobility, all kinds of solutions that are extremely relevant these days. And this doesn't come out of nothing. It comes from an ecosystem of innovation where the government plays a role, but obviously it's also the role of private sector, of the different organizations, and also the setting in Israel. And we're working now with the Philippine government in trying to create more collaboration on innovation. Also, us as an embassy here, we're looking to all kinds of opportunities, but also share the best practices and the Israeli approach and the investments of the Israeli government in helping this ecosystem to grow. So we are in touch with the DTI and the other Philippine government organizations. Also, it's important to mention that we have the Israeli trade and economic representation here in the Philippines. And one of the tasks there is to get Israeli and Philippine companies together. And again, we are focusing, and this is what Israel is doing, we're focusing on technologies and the Israeli innovation and to bring it to the Philippines. 2 words, because I love Inbal, you are here, and the book is amazing. I haven't met you. But Chutzpah, what a title for a book, because if you speak Hebrew or if you are Jewish, Chutzpah is really, this is the word. Sometimes it can be annoying, basically, and I'm sure Inbal will talk what Chutzpah means, so I'll not take the stage from you, Inbal, but sort of giving a book a title of Chutzpah and then the whole lecture about Chutzpah, this is a Chutzpah. This is really, and this is what makes it very interesting. And I think this is the interesting element in Israel, why Israel become became a hub for innovation. I think we'll hear about this today, and it's going to be a fascinating afternoon. And as usual, I plan to remain here from the beginning to the end. I'm really excited and looking forward to hear your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Flus. Let us now hear from the ICCP Director and Head of Tourism Committee, Mr. Bob Zozobrado.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Israel Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, President Mr. Uri Ofek, allow me to welcome all of you to another afternoon of learning. The Israeli Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines warmly thanks the Embassy of Israel, Manila, for inviting our speaker this afternoon. Thank you, Ambassador Ilan Flus, and Deputy Chief of Mission, Mr. Nir Balzam. Like all of you, I am excited to learn more about Chutzpah from Miss Arieli, Inbal Arieli. I'm eager to know more about this unique culture of the Israelis that supports creative thinking and risk-taking. Thank you, Ms. Arieli, for everything that we will learn from you this afternoon. We also have an amazing number of registrants today, so I thank all of you for joining us. We promise it will be worth your time. So ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to Chutzpah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Zozobrado. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like to let you know that we'll have a Q&A after her presentation. Please type your questions in the chat box. I'm also very happy to let you know that we will raffle 3 copies of the speaker's book, Chutzpah, after the Q&A, just before we end the event. Jane is now going to show you a copy of the book. Now, let me introduce to you our speaker, Inbal Arieli. He is the founder and the head of strategic partnerships and CEO of True Synthesis TLV, Tel Aviv. She is also the Chief Chutzpah Officer of the Chutzpah Center since August 2019. As an MBA graduate of Entrepreneurship and Strategy, Bachelor of Law and BA of Economics from Tel Aviv University. Let us all give a warm virtual applause to Ms. Inbal Arieli.
Thank you very much, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, the team at the ICCP. I'm in Tel Aviv at an office here. I wish I could be with you in Manila, in the Philippines, and I definitely look forward to visiting you sometime soon. I'm sharing my screen, okay? I just want to make sure that it works. So just a second, please. Okay, just a second, please. Okay, perfect. Can you see my screen? I just need someone to nod with their head or just say yes. I just want to make sure that it's working well.
No, Miss Inbal.
No, you don't.
Yes. No, we cannot see the screen.
No, we can't see it.
No. Okay, so we'll do something else. I'll disconnect from one of the screens here. Can you see it now or now? I guess not yet.
We can see a browser window.
Yes. Okay, so just a second. With your permission, I'm stopping sharing and I'll reshare. Okay, I think now it will work. Do you see the PowerPoint presentation now or still not?
The presentation view. the speaker view rather. Can we check the use slideshow button on the upper left?
Well, you know what? I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Let me
It's
try
okay.
to a keynote presentation. I've prepared a backup.
Okay.
Okay. It may work easier. Okay, and now do you see the full presentation?
Still the browser window. Maybe we can start the presentation first and then share the screen.
Just a second, please. I apologize. Okay, I'm trying one last time. I think this time it will work.
Better.
Yes,
Better.
works well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, persistence is also important, right? Okay, so thank you again for your patience, and I'm very happy to be here. And I myself am a tech entrepreneur, a tech investor from the Israeli tech ecosystem. For the past 20 plus years, I've spent my entire career in the Israeli tech ecosystem. And as a start, what I would like to do is actually show you a little bit about the current status of the Israeli tech ecosystem. And we'll try to do it very rapidly. Now, you know, we are this tiny place in the middle of the Middle East, a country of only 9 million people in population, but have a very strong presence and success as a global hub of entrepreneurship. Now, when you look at the different elements of the ecosystem, the first and foremost thing that is known about the Israeli mindset is that entrepreneurial mindset. We have the highest density of startups in the world with one startup for every 1,400 people. So a lot of innovation is actually translated into business activity. Now, the innovation that is translated into those startups is very diversified in a variety of industries, ranging from industries in which we have domestically necessity, such as water, for example. As I think many of you know, there are some very innovative water solutions and water technologies, the drip irrigation, the desalination that have come out of Israel. And that's or cybersecurity. So these are industries where we do have a domestic need, but we see also Israeli innovation today in a variety of industries where we don't necessarily have a domestic need, such as food technologies or computer vision in different elements, robotics, for example, fintech, financial technologies. And the current situation of the Israeli tech innovation landscape is actually a very diversified one, a very varied one that touches upon almost any vertical and any industry you can think of. And that is a very unique aspect of the Israeli innovative landscape compared to other top innovative countries. Now, all of that innovation and all of these startups also need oxygen, which for startups is actually funding, is money. Israel of 2020 attracts today more venture capital than any other country in the world, per capita, of course. But even if we look at the numbers, not per capita, but in absolute numbers, the numbers are just huge. So in 2020, which was another record year, okay, last year, there were over $10 billion of investments in venture capital in Israeli startups. In 2021, the 3 first quarters, $17 billion. And 2020 was another record year, so 2021 is now the new record year. And that has been the situation for the past decade. The Israeli tech ecosystem keeps growing in all the different elements, including funding year over year. Funding for the startups and for innovation is very important, but also funding for the long term and the more strategic view is critical. What started in the early 90s with some critical steps that the Israeli government actually took, incentivizing investment in R&D, 30 years later at today is run by the private market. But Israel, together with South Korea, are actually leading the charts in the percentage of GDP invested in R&D. In Israel, like I said, most of the investment is done by private organizations, mostly the tech giants of the world that have realized that the pool of talent that exists here is extremely unique and relevant for their global activities. We also see more and more Israeli companies growing. So not just startups like it used to be, and I'm sure many of you know the acronym Startup Nation, because for many years, Israel was known as, again, as an entrepreneurial place where a lot of startups are being born. And we've always thought that we had a challenge in growing and scaling and sustaining larger companies. I'm very glad to say that the situation today is different. We have a record number of companies listed on NASDAQ in the US. 2021 was a record year in terms of SPACs, of special shells, if you want, of companies going public through those shells and mergers and acquisitions. And if in 2013 there was only one Israeli tech company that was defined as a unicorn, meaning over $1 billion valuation for a private company, in 2021 there are over 65. So in 8 years, that number has exponentially grown, and every day we keep hearing about a new unicorn, a new Israeli private company with a valuation of over $1 billion. And that shows that there is not just a lot of startup activity, but also a lot of growth and market leaders activity coming out of Israel. All of that, together with the presence here in Israel of hundreds and hundreds of tech giants from around the world that are looking at the Israeli innovation landscape and actually creating bridges between the market overseas and the Israeli innovation and the Israeli talent. All of this success and these accomplishments of the very mature Israeli tech ecosystem are actually the results of less than 10% of the workforce in Israel, but which is responsible for over 43% of the experts. So only 400,000 people, that's it, are involved in this really success and these great numbers and all that innovation coming out of Israel. That challenge of having such a small group involved in technology here in Israel is also economically, as a country, our opportunity for growth. And that's exactly what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the talent. I want to talk about the people. I want to talk about the culture. What's special about it here, but also how it is applicable and relevant to you, my friends, in the Philippines. Now, zooming out of Israel for a second, the World Economic Forum keeps publishing its report about the skills for the future. And if you take, and that is of course relevant to the entire world, to economies all over the world. Now, if you take a deep look on the growing skills, those skills that are now in demand, you can see that most of those skills are actually soft skills, are skills that are very difficult to be taught at university or at school, but can be practiced actually through doing if we only set the right settings and the right environments for them to be nurtured and practiced and fostered. And you may ask yourself, okay, so how is the World Economic Forum and those soft skills relevant to Israel? And this is exactly what I want to answer and create that connectivity of all of these elements. Now, when I'm asked, and I'm often asked, what is the one reason for the success of Israel as a global hub, right, of innovation, of entrepreneurship? Typically, the answer that was given for many, many years, and it's of course a combination of elements. But the main differentiator that people have in mind is the Israeli military. Now, I myself am a veteran of the military. I myself served in one of the intelligence units that is known worldwide to be a hotbed for innovation and entrepreneurship, Unit 8200, which is the equivalent of the NSA in the US. Only in Israel, it's part of the military and hence occupied and populated by 18, 19, 20-year-old young adults. And that's where I served in the military, and many like me, and indeed many of the tech entrepreneurs that you will meet from Israel come from these special units in the military. However, I was not born 18, neither were my friends, and it's not something magical that just happened when we joined the military. My thesis, and Chutzpah, the book, actually claims that it all starts at a much, much, much younger age. So here's me in the military or after the military on this article that Forbes published, but also here's Inbal, the younger Inbal, who grew up in a typical Israeli family. I was born in the south of Israel, in Be'er Sheva, and my parents are a typical Israeli couple. They met at university, they started their family. And I believe that the roots of the Israeli entrepreneurial DNA, that chutzpah mindset, that by the end of my keynote, you will understand more, are actually rooted at a very young age here in Israel. But I also believe that they're not unique to Israel. I actually believe that it's a combination of skills, which is universal, that kids all over the world possess, and that adults all over the world have possessed in their past, sometimes have neglected throughout their life journey because of society and environment, but they're all there. And it's all about giving stage to those skills, those elements, and actually nurturing them. So I want to take you into what was my personal typical Israeli childhood journey. What was, I assume, of those Israelis here with us today, their journey, and to show you what it means to grow up in Israel. But as I do that, I encourage you not just to think about what's special about Israel, but actually to use the advice of the French philosopher Marcel Proust, and to wear a new pair of glasses, actually thinking about your lives in your environment. I think what he said was just beautifully said, that discovery doesn't always consist about finding new lands, but sometimes it's about seeing familiar ones, existing ones that you know already, with a new set of eyes. And I encourage you, as I show you a new land, okay, what it means to be an Israeli child, to actually think about yourselves, your society, your community, and how is that applicable to you. Okay, ready? Let's get started. So my journey starts here, just like almost any kid around the world, right? And seeing that, you should definitely know what this is, right? Because kids all over the world are familiar with this structure. Now, at the age of 4, we moved, my family and myself, moved from Israel, from Be'er Sheva, to Switzerland, to Geneva, for 3 years. My dad was a diplomat at that time, and I was enlisted into the International School of Geneva, where most diplomat kids went to school. I was 4 years old. I did not speak English. I did not speak French. I spoke only Hebrew at home, and I didn't understand the language. But gladly, the International School of Geneva is custom with kids coming from all around the world. So they have an onboarding process where at the first days you are spending the days with a teacher who's actually helping you to onboard and to get familiar with the other kids. And my first childhood memories are actually from these days, again, at the age of 4. And I remember a special event that happened where it was the first time the teacher actually, showed me the playground at school. And I immediately saw all these structures that I was completely familiar with, like any kid. Now, you may think to yourself, okay, we brought this serial tech entrepreneur from Israel not to speak about slides, right, and playgrounds, but bear with me. The kindergarten teacher took me to that structure and with hand gestures told me what to do. So there was a kid in front of me and she did like this. So I understood. I had to pause for a second because the kid was actually climbing up the ladder just in front of me. Once he reached the top of the ladder, she smiled at me. And I understood without, any words needed that it was a sign she gave me. I can climb up the ladder. I did the same. While I was climbing up the ladder and reached the top, she did like this again. The kid in front of me sat and slid down the slide. She smiled at me again. I did the same. By the time I reached the bottom of the slide, he was not there anymore. He went back to the ladder. So did I. Typical, simple, very fun, right? Structure and dynamics that kids all over the world know. And why am I telling you that story? While I was writing my book, I became fascinated by signs of playgrounds around the world. Because mind you, kids at the age of 4, 3, 5 are relatively the same all over the world, relatively, okay? What is different, and they have their universal human nature of what it means to be a young child, a toddler. What's different is actually the environment around them. And this is why instead of looking at children, I thought, oh, I should look at the environment around children and how that influences those children as they grow. So in playgrounds, it's signs. This sign is from Croatia, and I have examples of signs from different places in the world. And from looking at the sign, you can learn a lot because you can learn a lot about what's prohibited from doing in this specific average playground in Croatia. No pets, no glass bottles, no riding the bicycle, no eating ice cream. There's something else there on the right top corner that was deleted by someone. And then there's this sign in the middle of the sign here that says another thing about what you're not supposed to do. Now, I don't know what they mean because I just gave a keynote to a delegation from France an hour ago, and I asked them, what is this kid not supposed to do? And they gave me, at the same time, two different people gave me two different answers. One said, the kid is not supposed to climb up the slide. And the second person said, no, he's not supposed to slide down backwards. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. What I know for sure is, as a 4-year-old looking at these signs in Croatia, in this example, I learn by telling me what not to do, I actually learn what I'm supposed to do. And what I'm supposed to do is exactly similar to what my kindergarten teacher in Geneva taught me. There's a best practice. The best practice is you climb up the ladder, you go down the slide. Makes sense. So far, not very innovative. Now, I took this picture only 2 weeks ago in a playground in Tel Aviv, average playground, Tel Aviv, center of Israel. And it's in Hebrew, so I don't think you can understand a lot. But let me tell you what it says. The first top sign is the logo of the municipality. It doesn't say a lot. The second top sign says that there is, and as you can see, it's the only thing that is prohibited, and that is to light a barbecue or a fire in the playground. Now, again, this playground is in the middle of Tel Aviv, central city of Israel. I don't know who would light a barbecue there, but that's what they chose to say. Don't light a barbecue. The second thing is actually what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to take good care of the plants in the area, okay? And also to clean after you. And the third bottom sign says that playing in this playground for children up to the age of 4 requires the supervision of an adult. Up to the age of 4. That's what it says. So instead of saying a lot of things that you're not supposed to do, it provides very, very limited restrictions. And even the restriction about, or the requirements about adult supervision is extremely limited, right? Till the age of 4. So a 5-year-old is actually welcome to this playground by themselves. I hope that you see by now already the difference in how the environment, society, can actually create in children's behavior. Children's, and then of course later on adults' behavior. So this is how an Israeli typical playground would look like. Nothing similar to the one I experienced in the International School of Geneva, although the children are as smart, as creative, as fun everywhere in the world. But the environment has a completely different set of expectations from them. So in the Israeli playground, you will see kids running all over in all directions. One's jumping, the other is pausing. They're bumping into each other. They're relatively loud. A lot of things are happening simultaneously, and it's fine. Actually, statistically, there are no more injuries in Israeli playground than in other countries in the OECD. So it's as safe as the other examples I gave you. And how come, if everything is allowed? Because children by themselves learn how to resolve conflicts between them. They learn best practices by themselves. They learn the rules of physics in the playground, okay, just by playing. And they learn to manage risks. They learn all these things, not because they're being taught to do that, but just because the environment enables them and provides the right setting for them to experience. And that's why I think of these skills that I've showed you at the beginning as muscles, because I actually believe that we all possess the same soft skills anatomy in our bodies, in our souls, in our minds, in our spirits. What we do differently is we use them in a different way. We are aware to different muscles and we practice different soft skills throughout our lives. But they're all there, which is great news because it means we can all practice them. Balagan, which means chaos or mess in Hebrew, is a state of mind very present in our day-to-day life here in Israel, everywhere. It's relatively messy and chaotic. And for the eyes of someone coming from the outside looking at an Israeli playground, it will feel extremely chaotic. But there is a different order to that chaos. And actually, when you think of it, a new order can only be created out of chaos. If things are so well designed and so well defined, it's very difficult to change them. So in a sense, I think of chaos, of balagan, as an opportunity to create and evolve and develop into a new order, and then create a new chaos and create a new order out of it. And a new order in technology, a new order in innovation, a new order in so many things that we can think about. Another very important element to the Israeli mindset is the one of the tension, or actually the balance, between strong individuals, very opinionated. So these children that you saw in the playground that are allowed to play however they want, they learn that their voice matters, that they can say what they think, that they're allowed to ask questions. They become independent, opinionated individuals. But at the same time, throughout their childhood, they are constantly encouraged to work in teams, to work in groups, to walk to school together with friends, to come back from school with friends. And there is a very strong connection at the same time between a strong individual and being part of a group. It's a tension that we sometimes think we need to choose between one or the other. And I actually say no. The best teams I know are teams where each individual has place for their voice and can speak up and feel trusted to say what they think and then to reach a decision, either follow a decision of someone or reach a decision together. Now, I can show you many more pictures of what it means to be an Israeli child today. Okay, not when I was growing up, it was the same, but even today, these are all images of Tel Aviv, where I live, where my children grow up, and of modern Israel today. Kids are given a lot of independence. Now, when they reach adolescence and they become teenagers, kids all over the world and in Israel go through, this phase. Some of you may have children at home and teenagers at home and understand what I'm speaking about. This phase of teenagers is one of where they act not that reasonably, okay? In Hebrew, actually, the most used term for teenagers is tipesh esrei. Tipesh esrei means the stupid decade or the decade of stupidity. Because in that time of life, they don't act very reasonably. Like I said, they try a lot of things, they take a lot of risks, but that's not unique to Israelis, right? What's unique is, again, the way environment, society sets expectations. Now, does that mean that we say, oh, guys, you're in your stupidity phase, you can do whatever you want? No, we acknowledge that they're going through that phase, but they can go through that phase and occasionally act in a stupidly manner because it's normal, in a disruptive manner, because that's what they're supposed to do at this age, but at the same time, also be very responsible if you only let them. This is an example from the Israeli Scouts, where 16-year-old guides, we don't call them instructors because they don't instruct, they're actually guides. They provide guidance to younger children. Now, the choice of words I'm making has a lot of importance because words create reality. If you're an instructor, you provide instructions. If you're a guide, you show the way. You guide someone. It's different. It's nuanced, but it's different. This is another example of these teenagers that are volunteering in the Red Cross in Israel. And when I say volunteering, it's not doing paperwork. It's not even, organizing the equipment. It's actually going in the ambulances and helping the paramedics daily and supporting them in their work. It's meaningful because if we only let them take on meaningful part in society while listening to what they have to say because they are opinionated and showing them how to work together and manage risks and everything I've showed you so far, all these elements together, we can actually trust them to do incredible things. Only then do we join the military. So now we've reached that point in time where we are joining the Israeli military equipped with all that toolbox that we've prepared, that we've trained, that we've practiced throughout our childhood. And I do want to focus here on a few elements. First, it's not just the military. Today in Israel, we have only 50% of the teenagers at the age of 18 join the military. And other groups in the Israeli society do not join the Israeli military, but they do join other frameworks, gap years, social service. They do take part in our community, in our life as a nation. What's common to all these frameworks, be it the military or other frameworks for 18-year-old children, they are children at that age, or young adults, is that they don't have the right experience or the relevant knowledge, right, If you take my case, I was, like I told you, in the Israeli NSA, the Israeli Elite Special Intelligence Unit. I graduated from high school. I did not even understand what it means or have any relevant experience. My peers in the US were people in the middle of their careers, in their 40s. So how come? Because the Israeli military has realized that instead of looking at credentials, hard credentials, your grades from schools, your choices of what you've chosen to learn at school, we should find ways to assess your skill set and, more importantly, your potential for development. And if we find the right ways of fitting people with the right potential to the right positions and then training them rapidly in the right way, that's optimal. Now, when you think about the job market that we are already experiencing now globally, companies like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, LinkedIn have started to diminish their list of credentials that they're looking at and have started to implement different methodologies of assessment that are geared towards assessing skills and capabilities rather than knowledge and experience, understanding that there is an untapped pool of talent out there that they would miss if they would only focus on very specific credentials. So that's one thing. A second important element is that we live here in Israel in a constantly changing environment, always. And this is part of our energy here in the air. But that also creates a tendency or an ease of adapting to changing environments, reacting, and having a very agile mindset into changes that occur around us that we are not in control of. I can speak a lot about what's unique in the military. I do want to focus on one specific element, which has to do with the training in the military, especially in special forces. And that is the notion of, the way I call it, is getting stuck. Now, what do I mean by that? We are taught from a very young age in modern countries, in developed countries, that knowledge is power. In my view, what's very unique about the Israeli military is that by training, we actually show the young soldiers that knowledge is important, but more importantly is understanding that you don't know everything, that you don't have pre-ready answers for everything. And actually what's more important is feeling comfortable not having all the answers. So what we do at training, we actually provide them with challenges that they cannot solve because they don't know how to solve them. And we tell them, this is what life is all about. It's about not knowing what to do, not having prepared answers to circumstances, but being capable of reacting in different ways. In which way, I don't know, it depends on the circumstances, but bringing yourself and not freezing and reacting and making the best out of a situation. These are just examples of soldiers that I wanted to show you that are very different from one another. If you look at them from distance, they look similar, but from close, you'll see that actually each one of them has a different way of wearing their equipment on the vest. Not only it's not forbidden, and not only there's one best practice and one way of using your vest and your equipment, they're actually encouraged to find their own self-customized, optimal way for themselves to wear their equipment and to use it. Success in the Israeli military is far more important than excellence. And that's a lesson for life then. Because excellence and perfection, could take us so long to achieve. And maybe by the time we achieve it, it's not relevant anymore. But success of a mission is critical, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not as excellent as I would want it to be. And when you think about innovation, when you think about entrepreneurship, This is very, very important. The last thing I want to tell about the Israeli mindset is the notion of big thinkers. So although it's a tiny, tiny country with only 9 million people in population and a small size of geography, from a very young age, we encourage people here to think big. Not to do only what they're supposed to do, not to focus only on what they were told to do, but constantly to think on a larger scale, to take on responsibility, to be accountable, to not be afraid of making decisions, even at the cost of making mistakes, to be in a doing, okay, and not freeze. All of these elements that we've talked about before, these are all together the Chutzpah principles. So Chutzpah, like the ambassador mentioned, is a word in Hebrew, which actually in Hebrew has a negative connotation, and it means being rude. But the larger connotation worldwide for this word is audacity, is daring, stepping out of your comfort zone, thinking about the impossible and saying, hey, we could make that work. And all of the elements that I've talked about before, giving you examples through the Israeli childhood, are part of the chutzpahdik mindset altogether. So it's not one thing you're supposed to do. It's actually a combination of skills, a combination of elements, ranging from how you deal with uncertainty and embracing uncertainty as part of life, as part of nature. I mean, think of COVID-19 pandemic, right? This is exactly what happened on a global scale. Daring to fail and feeling comfortable with making mistakes, challenging the obvious, challenging reality as we know it, looking at reality, just like Marcel Proust said, in a different set of eyes, constantly asking questions, okay, yourself and others, so you can learn, so you can evolve, so you can develop. Of course, collaborate, because nothing ever is done by one person, and it's always a combination of skills, a combination of ideas, a combination of energy. And speaking of energy, making things happen, being in motion, doing. All of these elements together are very present in daily life in Israel. And they're critical for the future of just anyone on this conversation. Because when you look now back again on the skills for the future that the World Economic Forum has portrayed and has defined for us, you can see that they're all soft skills, or most of them are soft skills that are geared towards innovation, towards acting, towards all of these elements that are part of the chutzpahdik mindset. So this is my message to you. I want to finish with this picture of my family. So this is my family, 4 generations. My children are a little older now than in this picture. But the reason I wanted to show you this picture is because this is a typical Israeli family posing. As you can see, everyone's looking at the camera, capturing a moment in life. Okay, a family picture. Now, I assume that this family is my twin family somewhere in the world, as nurturing, as loving, as talented as my children, okay? I'm assuming we are twin families, identical in our values. But as you can see, the way of pausing for a minute and taking a family picture, one which will probably, be printed and framed in our living room, is very different. And my message is that there is no one way of doing innovation. There's no one way of becoming entrepreneurs. But there are some skills today. There are some universal capabilities and traits that I believe are critical. I actually believe we all possess them. It's just a matter of awareness, and it's a matter of practice. Last thing is yeh beseder. As an entrepreneur, as someone living in a very tough neighborhood, not in Tel Aviv, but actually, in the Middle East, I have to remain optimistic. And yeh beseder means everything will be okay. But it does not actually mean that somehow, miraculously, things will turn out okay. It actually means that I myself and all my friends here in Israel and my children and my parents and everyone around us, we will make sure that things will be okay. So it's our responsibility as citizens of the world to make sure that we address all the challenges and take on the responsibility and accountability to make things better. And this is what Chutzpah, the book, is all about. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions if there's more time and there are questions now, I would really love to do that. And I will, of course, share with all of you all my social media credentials, and I encourage you to contact me with any additional question you may have. But I'm staying, of course. I'm ready for questions. Let me see. Let me open the, okay. Yeah.
And okay, we have one question. I was told, do you see your book as a parenting book as much as it is a business book?
Thank you for this question. It's a great question. So my playground is the business space. And that's where I come from in terms of mindsets, right? I've spent the past 20 years working with entrepreneurs in Israel, but also investing and being an entrepreneur myself and fostering a lot of innovation. And so my starting point was always business. How do we apply these dynamics into business? And that's my focus. I have 3 boys of my own, of myself and my husband, 19, 16, and 12 years old. And I'm a proud mom, but I don't think of myself as a parenting, guru or a parenting advisor. I made my own share of mistakes as a mom. But I know from many readers around the world that they found inspiration, mostly as young parents, reading the book and understanding more than anything that independence is possible to be provided to children and is important to be provided for them. So that's my best parenting advice. The book, by the way, was published by Harper Business, and it sits on the shelves of business books.
Okay, great. So we have all of a sudden a bunch of questions came in. So we have one now from Raymond Pignon. Would you say the current system of assessments in schools are actually curtailing innovative mindsets?
So I'm not very familiar with the Philippine school system. I can tell you that for Israel is ranked relatively low on all the PISA ratings, relatively low, even lower than the US, mind you. And there's a huge gap. And how can you explain that, right? Between what's happening today in the school system, the education system in Israel, versus the success of the tech ecosystem. It's the same people. Just a gap of not even many years between them. So how come? I believe that the most important role of schools today is actually being a social environment for children to come and practice their social skills. And I think that school is still, generally speaking, rating children, yes, with ratings that are less relevant to today's world. I told you I had a group of from France. Some of them were students, and we talked about the fact that many of the things that they're now learning in engineering school, by the time they graduate and onboard into their careers, some of what they're learning today and investing a lot of time will just be obsolete, not relevant. Some positions, some professions that will occur in 10 years from now, we don't even know how to imagine them. So I wish schools would be more focused on social skills, understanding that knowledge is becoming more of a commodity with larger access all around the world to the knowledge.
Okay, thank you. We also have a question from Manuel Guzman. How can chutzpah help someone with a timid mindset?
With a timid
Mindset.
yeah. So, it's like asking a musician, how can music help you, live a better life? I believe that the chutzpah mindset, with the different elements in it, is an essential toolbox for everything. Okay. Now, what I do want to emphasize is that there's no one single formula. There's no one single way, okay, of applying the chutzpah mindset. And so I like to think of it like a weighted average, where you have a set of elements that are consistent. They're always there, but the weight, the gravitas that each element is given varies from one formula to the other, and that creates a different outcome. So for different people, for different environments, for different organization, for different industries, for different purposes, you may want to apply the chutzpah mindset in a slightly different way, with a different combination between the elements. Now, I did not give you a clear answer, I know, because there is no one clear answer.
Okay, so we have a question from Ambassador Flus. Is chutzpah global? Can the Israeli approach be implemented in other cultures?
So I definitely believe that the core elements that comprise of the chutzpah mindset, curiosity and independence and social and emotional intelligence, and many other things, I do believe they're universal. And I actually believe that they, like I said, it's like our body anatomy. We all share the same set of muscles in our bodies. What's different is which ones we choose to strengthen and practice, right? So a basketball player would focus on some muscles, whereas a ballet dancer would focus on another set of muscles. But originally they have the same set of muscles in their bodies. That's exactly how I think of the chutzpah mindset. I think originally it's universal and we all possess it. Throughout our lives, we are aware and to different skills, and we give stage to different skills based on our personality, based on our environment, of course. And so, yes, it is universal. Do I believe it should be applied in each and every place, just like in Israel? Not necessarily. Just like I said before, the application of the chutzpah mindset should vary from one place to the other, but all the elements should be present, in my opinion.
Thank you. So now we have a question again from Raymond Pignon. Would you say the Israeli entrepreneurial mindset is the critical success factor rather than government support for innovation systems?
On a long-term basis, I think we know by now that yes, because we do see, by the way, in other countries around the world, governmental support to tech. We do see in other places in the world that have military service compulsory, just like in Israel. And there are many other countries in the world that are pockets of immigration, just like Israel. So when you divide those elements, they exist in other places in the world. And yet they do not have the same success of Israel as a hub of innovation and entrepreneurship. I think it's a combination of these elements, but the most critical one and the long-term lasting one is actually the human perspective, the human factor, and that entrepreneurial mindset, especially when we think about the future of the world and the future of economies, where entrepreneurship is, and now it's clear, is the global force of growth, entrepreneurship and technology, and that combination together. So yes, definitely.
Thank you, Inbal. So we have a question here from Monsi Serrano. The Eastern thought always teaches about patience. How can chutzpah influence or be integrated in their culture? They always say you cannot hatch an egg by hammering it. Thank you so much.
I love this question. And, that's a great example of something, a muscle that I wish we here in Israel would strengthen, our patience muscle. So that's just a great example on how eventually it's really many things together. I think patience is very important. I think persistence, okay, which is somehow connected to patience, is also critical. However, we need to realize that we are living in an era where things are changing in a rapid pace that even it's very difficult even for ourselves to digest and process. Exponential change is happening in so many things. Who would imagine that by the end of 2025, there would be dozens of space missions every year to space, every year. 7 years from now, we wouldn't think that would be the pace, okay? And so patience is critical and important, but we also as humans need to understand that we live in a time now where things are moving very, very quickly. And we need each to find the right combination and balance between what's happening around us globally and in our own communities, and that element of persistence and patience.
Okay, and then we have quite a few people asking where they can buy your book.
I'll add a link to the chat if I'm permitted, but anyway, it's available on Amazon. It was published by HarperCollins. It's just super easy to click Chutzpah Inbal Arieli on Amazon, and you can get it in all the different versions, by the way. I'll say that it has also been released in Chinese, in Japanese, in Korean, in Hebrew, of course, soon to come out in Vietnamese, in Ukrainian, and more countries are now following.
Okay. Now we have a question from Riz Reyes. Do you agree that chutzpah principle is very appropriate for generations Y and Z?
So I agree. I do agree. But again, thinking of my generation here in Israel, it was present even before, and even the generation of my parents. So it is, I think, more present with Gen Y and Z. And I think also the fact that they understand that they have more power, or they believe in themselves, that they have, correctly, by the way, more power and accountability to change things. And they are less, again, as a generation, relying on the adults to tell them what to do. And I think that's great, by the way. I think it's challenging as a parent, it's challenging, for governments, it's challenging for societies. But I think it's a very positive bubbling that's happening, actually.
Next question from Eric Joyce Grande. Do universities in Israel deliberately introduce and incorporate the principle and practice of chutzpah in their academic programs?
So not formally, but if you'll go into an Israeli classroom with the first graders at the age of 6 or teenagers in high school or students, I think you will recognize some of these elements just because of the spirit. The conversation, the debate, the brainstorming is somehow different than in other places, and it embeds naturally, because that's how people think here, these elements. So it does not need to be taught explicitly. It just needs to be given stage, which it does. For example, asking questions. It's very encouraged, and it's actually, I would feel terrible giving a keynote and not having so many questions asked of me. As an Israeli, I love the fact that that we are actually exchanging thoughts here, and that I made you think of things, and that we are creating this conversation. So that's what's also happening in different classrooms at different ages.
Okay, our next question is from Michael Makantay, who is one of the directors of the Chamber of Commerce. And his question is, how is chutzpah used and applicable during this pandemic and other crises?
Wow, great question. Actually, the Hebrew second edition of the book is coming out next week with a full new chapter about the reaction of Israel to the COVID-19 pandemic. And what I've seen throughout the past, almost 2 years here in Israel, is a lot of chaos, a lot of changing regulation almost on a daily basis, at least in the first year of the pandemic. More experts than anyone could imagine to pandemics. And when I say more experts, it's not real experts. Everyone was an expert here. And the reason I'm giving a lot of solidarity between people and a lot of connectivity between the talent in the military, for example, in technological units, and the healthcare challenges. For example, at the beginning with ventilators, if you remember at the very beginning of the pandemic, everyone had a shortage of ventilators. And in Israel, the military said, okay, we will develop ventilators. And within a week, some special units in the military developed improvised ventilators, okay? Eventually, we did not need to use them. But all these elements together that I gave you, and especially that agility of making a decision, changing it a week after because it was the right thing to do, okay? Which seemed chaotic. I think that has a lot to do with those chutzpah elements that we talked about and how Israelis react to different crises. In addition to that, and this conversation is framed around the tech ecosystem. It's also very important to note that Israel entered this pandemic with an extremely innovative digital healthcare ecosystem prior to the pandemic, and one of the largest data sets in the world of electronic medical records about the entire population. And that has to do with the structure of the Israeli healthcare system. Of course, the timing was perfect. So the data about all the population in Israel is electronic for the past 25 years already. The fact that it's a small country of only 9 million people, okay, quick to react. All of these elements together have helped us, I would say, succeed, I hope succeed in going through this pandemic in a relatively good way. So it's a combination of the macro of the healthcare system of Israel, the fact that it has a lot of data, the fact that there is a lot of digital health. Doctors, patients are used to remote healthcare here, and the mindset of reacting and changing and adapting and optimizing almost on a daily basis.
Okay, our next question is from Bob Sozobrado. I see chutzpah as something that decreases in intensity as one grows older. Can you share with us some tips on how to reverse such situation?
Could you repeat, please? How chutzpah?
I see chutzpah as something that decreases in intensity as one grows older. Can you share with us some tips on how to reverse such situation?
Yes. So Bob, I agree with you generally speaking, and I think that as we grow, we think we understand more, so we ask less questions, and we understand more about risks, so we take less risks. And generally speaking, these are just two examples. I agree with you. I do think that there are ways of creating the right settings and the right dynamics for fostering in adults different elements of chutzpah. And I'll give you an example from few very practical examples. So, for example, a brainstorming conversation in a company. I have a company which is a leadership assessment company operating mostly in North America. And my partners are Americans. So we had a strategic conversation. About, the go-to-market strategy. It was a brainstorming session, 2 Israelis, 2 Americans. It was a very fruitful one, by the way. We came out of this conversation with a completely different set of ideas. Coming out of the conversation, my US partner approached me and said, Inbal, what happened? Why did you and the other Israeli kept, arguing and like, I don't understand. Don't you want to create this company together? And I said, like, Joe, this was the best brainstorming session we ever had. What do you mean? I realized at that point that what was for me a brainstorm, a storm of ideas, for him was something completely different. And then we agreed that forever from now on, our brainstorming sessions would look like a storm, because we want actually in these conversations to bring as many ideas as possible. So where there's trust, you can actually create the right setting, and this is just an example on how to bring up more ideas. If people are afraid to speak up, they will never speak up. Another example is changing positions in a board meeting. People tend to feel more comfortable sitting one next to each other, and they have their regular seats. If you proactively tell them to change seats, the conversation will be different. They look at things from different perspectives. They suddenly hear different people. They're aware of different things. So with adults or young professionals, I think we have to be much more aware of how do we design the settings to enable these traits to come out. I'm actually publishing a Chutzpah one-on-one online course soon, which will be all about these practical ideas. And I hope it will help adults to design these environments in a different way.
All right, the last question we'll be having is from Mikey Chua. Is there any downside or a disadvantage to the chutzpah mindset in your experience?
Yes, of course, there must be, right? There is and there must be. There is a price to adopting these behaviors, these mindsets in everyday life. In the context of innovation, in the context of entrepreneurship, they're all extremely positive and constructive and disruptive in a good way. In other contexts in life, in day-to-day life, they're very challenging. Maybe the best example I could give you would be to drive the streets of Tel Aviv. The same behaviors are very, very challenging when driving in Tel Aviv. The thing is, can we distinguish? Can we behave in one way in the entrepreneurial, innovative, tech, or other spaces and then behave differently in another context? We probably could and should, but it's very difficult. So there are disadvantages. I personally think that overall, if you're a positive person and you actually drive all that energy, the chutzpah mindset and the chutzpah energy to good things, to positive impact, the benefits are much higher than the disadvantages.
All right, thank you, Inbal. So everybody, that was our last question. I'll be saying a few words. After those few words, don't disappear because we will be raffling off 3 copies of Inbal's book. Now, this is only available to people in the Philippines. We're not shipping it overseas. So if you're not in the Philippines, you're not going to receive it. And you have to be online. If your name comes up and you're not online, you will not receive a copy. We'll raffle it to somebody else. So thank you, Inbal, for all learnings you have shared with us today. At this point, I would like to once again thank the Embassy of Israel Manila for making this event possible. Thank you to our platinum members, Ethiopian Airlines and X-Links Events, our gold members, Diana Business Consultancy, Duzitani Manila, Star K Kosher, and Watermatic Philippines. ICCP also invites you to our upcoming events. Philippines Taxation on Inheritance, Estate, and Legacy Planning Strategies on November 9, Tuesday, 3 p.m. And our 24th General Members Meeting, Navigating Opportunities in 2022, Global Market and Philippines Economic Outlook, which will take place on November 17, Wednesday at 3 p.m. We also will be having, especially for those in the tourism industry, Hebrew for Beginners, November 22 to 26. As promised, we're giving away 3 copies of Chutzpah, a book by Inbal, to 3 lucky participants. So I will now be sharing my screen, and we have a raffle wheel, and we'll be able to see who will win. So we'll share screen. And here we go. All right, so David Anui, are you here? Okay, well, Jane, can you please check? And
Yeah, checking right now. Just a moment. None.
not here.
David is
Okay,
not, David is not here.
all right, so we'll go to the next one.
Okay.
Ramon Hontiveros.
Ramon, if you're here, can you message in the chat as well? Going once, going twice, none here? Not here, Ramon.
Okay,
Let's try again. David, please.
Art Basi.
Art. Checking. Yes, Art is here.
Okay,
Art. Okay, 2 more.
so
Congratulations, Art.
So Art, you'll have to be in touch with Jane on how to receive your copy of the book.
Okay. 2 more, please.
Jose Domingo Guzman.
Let me check real quick. Yes, Mr. Guzman is here.
Okay,
Yeah.
and one
Last
more.
one.
Ronnie Katangay.
Ronnie Katagay. Just a moment. Let me just check real quick. Not here.
Okay. Lazaro Isidoro the third.
Just a moment. Not here, David. One more time.
Okay. Edgar Lorente.
Is here. I'm almost sure.
Okay. Yes.
One of our members, one of our active members. Yes, he's here.
Okay. So everyone, if you're not a member, please get in touch with Jane at secretariat@iccp.ph to arrange the shipment of your book to your location. All right. So thank you, everyone. I will stop the share. And so congratulations to all the winners. And please direct message Jane so she can send the book to you. Thank you, everyone, for attending our event, and hope to see you at the next ones. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Inbal.
Thank you very much for
start.